So good morning, everybody. Just repeat the welcome that Nick gave you. It's really marvellous that there's so many people here to see in the official launch of the Woven Network and to help the RES move forward in this whole area of entomophagy. We have clearly one really big challenge with establishing insects as food and feed, which has already been highlighted in the advice that's been given by the group of experts to the European Commission and to EFSA, and that is the safety and security of the materials going into the insect food chain, that is the substrates they're going to be feeding on, and the safety and security of the materials coming out. And Nick's already alluded to this, and there is also some concern, for example, about heavy metal contamination and things like this, as well as allergies. In the breaks, I urge you to have a look at the posters we've got here, because one of them does look at quite an interesting potential route for metal contamination of insect materials, which people wouldn't have thought about unless that work had been done. So these three sessions that we have now are from very different people, but they all have this thread of establishing insects for food and feed as a safe and secure way of providing food. I'd like to call first on Ilkka Taponen of Green Food Ltd. Green is an interesting company based in Finland, which is majoring on combination of vegetable source proteins, that's oats and bean. So in a way, he's talking about a competition to what he's looking at the moment. But some of you may know him as the founder of the very interesting and useful Maggot Master-blog, and I hope he's going to give us some information about that as well. So, Ilkka, could you come forward, and do you have a presentation?
Yes, I do.
Brilliant.
It should be there.
Well, we have to work out how to do things. Can you come and do that?
Yes, it's great. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
My policy right there. No. Yes, thank you. So let me just put my clock so I know I'll be not taking too long. So good morning also from my behalf to all of you. Great to see so many people joining, and also thank you for the Woven Network for inviting me all the way from Finland. So I think am I the only foreigner here? Yes. Okay. Yeah, but I think, yeah. But anyway, I feel very welcome. not alien at all. So thank you again. So my topic is risk management in high-scale insect farming. This is also a topic of my thesis that I actually released now 1 year and 1 day ago. It is available for download at the Maggot Master-blog. That is, you can find it in ilkkataponen.com, and here it's spelled if it's unclear. I'll also give the direct link in the last slide. So I will talk about the risks, maybe in a little bit different way that was now just given out in the last slides. This is more like a business risk more than a health risks. But before I go forward, maybe I tell a little bit more about myself. I've been working in startup companies now for about 5 years, first in medical industry and then turned into the insects. And I was doing an internship in Ynsect company in Paris, one of the biggest in Europe and maybe also in the world. And during that time I wrote the thesis. And after that I came back to Finland. I've been working there with one company, Nordic Insect Economy. Mostly like part-time, and now, as mentioned, I just started in a new company called Green Foods. That is not an insect company, but anyway a novel foods company, creating another alternative for the future of protein. So this is my background, and maybe also mention that in all of these companies I've been working in production and process development, and that's how all of this is linked also to this topic. So first of all, like how the risk profile is created in this industry, and there are a few things that make it unique. As all of you know, this is a very new thing. only like we have seen the growth happening only in the past, let's say, 6 years. Also, the thesis that I did was the first one in the world, and I think it's still the first that is combining the business risk management and the entomology. Of course, there are a lot of studies like we see here about the risks of the farming alone, but not combining, let's say, supply chain risk management and the entomology farming. So first of all, we have the limited knowledge. So this is related and like it underlines in all aspects of the risks. So we do not know about the pathogens that can enter and disrupt the production, but we do not know either like the performance or the optimal performance of the insects that we reared. And the performance, I mean the growth and the potential to lay eggs, and there's a high standard deviation. So as we do not exactly understand the perfect temperatures, the perfect density of the farms, then we suffer for high standard deviation, and this leads to high inventory carrying cost. So and this means that when we do not know how much we actually produce with this amount of eggs that we start, we do a little bit extra overproduction to be sure that we can deliver to our customers. So if you are familiar with lean management, is someone knows one, two at least? Okay, and three. Okay, more? No, you are just okay, scratching your head. Okay, but anyway, but lean management is a modern way of managing production and many other things as well. But the worst thing that you can do is overproduce. So when you overproduce, it hides all other problems in your production. When you overproduce, you overuse of feed. So it's really hard to understand the efficiency of the production, and then you end up just with a very expensive production compared to industries where you understand the performance and the ideal ways of operating. So and then next thing is the limited amount of companies. So as you know, and we saw, we have only a few ants now and not the big hive. So this leads to an issue that we call the lack of horizontal integration. So we have the supply chain, it's like goes vertically like this. We start here from the insect farms, let's say an example of entomophagy farms. Then we have maybe someone importing, like mophagy maybe, and then we come maybe this level. We have someone doing an end product, and then we have a supermarket, and then we all are here in the ground level, the end users. So usually we have a very wide, not usually, but in a traditional farm, we have a wide selection, wide stream that goes vertically down. But now we have only very few operators, so maybe we do like this, and we have the supermarkets and the end users are still there, but we have only few farms. So we have a narrow stream, and so horizontally squeezed. So if something happens to a farm, let's say the pathogens break out, that it can happen because we have only limited knowledge. So it is possible that the stream cuts off completely, and then in the downstream of the supply chain, you're left out with no supply. And since there is so limited amount of companies, no matter how much money you have, you cannot buy those replacing products. And this can happen in any level of the supply chain. So if you are the supermarket wanting to have those bars, let's say, you cannot get replacing bars. And then, okay, and the bars, why they're not there is because the farm had an issue. So you can conclude from this that to control your own risks in the business, you must control the risk of the others in the whole chain, mostly upwards, but also downwards, because it's and of course, if you are able even to produce in the upstream, if the companies below are suffering from some sort of risks, then where do you sell your products when the downstream is not working? So maybe from this slide, we do some small math as well, not only biology today. So we have limited knowledge, we multiply it by the lack of horizontal integration, and we end up with increased risk environment. So then more about the risks themselves. So well, when we talk about risks, we can put them in different categories. So I don't list them. I have just two. The operational risk is the most common risk that happen. So someone has a flat tire, or someone just makes a mistake with packing. Anything that can happen. These happen all the time in every industry, but then only when they pile up, they have a significant impact. But then in the other end is the hazard risk. That is a risk that is out of control of the company. If we have a volcano eruption, or we have a war, or whatever. So these are things that the company cannot control. And before telling more about this, I tell about the second slide. Is the biggest risk is the pathogen breakout. So as I mentioned, the pathogens of the insects, they are very largely unknown. And during my thesis, when I was doing it, I was talking with Dr. Jürgen Eilenberg from the University of Copenhagen, and he's, let's say, at least in my opinion, the leading leader in the knowledge of pathogens of the insects. He said that there's no way right now that insect companies could be able to control the pathogens completely. So in every farm will suffer from pathogen breakout, more serious or less serious, eventually. So it's just a matter of how you control them. So now when we have such a situation that we do not understand what are the pathogens, how they come up to the production and the logistics chain, we cannot consider these as operational risks as we could, let's say, call in a production of these assembly of these these pointers. Yeah. So now we have a tilted situation where we have more hazard risks than operational risks, simply because it is not. You cannot call something operational risk when you don't understand it. So this also highlights the risks profile and that there's a high risk exposure in the insect farming, and there are more hazard risks. Yes. So, but of course, no matter what type of risk you have, you can control them. And risk pooling is what you should do. This is also the conclusion of my thesis. So risk pooling means that you do not have all your operations in the same place. So you can risk pool by internal or external way. So let's say we talk again about the actual farms. The farm should not be in one location in one department, but rather you have one. If you have only one room or a facility, you segregate different areas. So when you have eventually you have the pathogen exposure, you are able to then isolate it, and then it's only affecting part of your production. But this is a very difficult thing to do because the pathogens can also travel through air. So you should not only have separate feed, separate water, separate maybe cleaning systems, but also separate AC and air control. But this is also for all the companies to do the risk analysis themselves and then see how they can do. But of course, best way is that you have multiple locations and then they have multiple departments. So then you are like, the higher the risk pooling efforts are, then the better. Usually hazard risks are controlled and mitigated by insurances. But now, since we have this special situation of lack of knowledge, it is very unlikely that you are able to get an insurance against pathogen breakout. And so in traditional production, it is a normal thing to have insurance against production disruptions. But when you go, if something happens, you go to the insurance company and say, okay, all our insects died. The insurance company will ask you that why it happened. Did you not do your work, or is it something that really you couldn't avoid? And there's no one in the world that can answer the question. So then who will decide that did you actually did you really pay attention and do your work or not? So it is likely that insurances are not an option at this way at this stage. So yes, still have a good time. Good. So lastly, I want to say this one word: cooperate. I would like to encourage all of you to do more cooperation. During my thesis, when I was doing interviews with companies, multiple companies said that they do not want to talk with me, not about anything. I didn't even have the chance to ask, what's your name or how you're doing. It's just like no. And this is my understanding that the companies are afraid that their company secrets are exposed and someone is going to use them. But this is a wrong way to go. I believe it is so that the companies working in the field have wrongly identified their competition. So then, no matter where are you located in the supply chain, the ones doing similar things with you are not your competition, but they are a way to break the problem of horizontal integration. And so when you have companies doing the work with you in the same situation, they break the barriers of entry for new businesses to enter and new customers. The competition are the traditional and the old-fashioned and the worst products, right? So now all the companies that fail in the industry are a loss for you as well. This is something that I would like to underline, and I do when I talk with companies. This is what I say to all of you. Of course, there might be a situation where someone is going to use your knowledge, but there is always more to win than there is to lose. It is very much more likely that you will benefit from the networking and cooperation. And lastly, I would like to say this thing I learned from a senior person I was talking with, and this is a very interesting idea, that no matter what is your industry, whatever you're doing, the person or the company that learns the fastest will win the one who knows the most. And when you think about it, no matter how much you know, eventually the faster company will catch up with you, no matter if they steal your knowledge as you have at the moment. That maybe speeds up their growth. But then again, if someone really is not professional, is only relying on stealing and doing something not so moral, so then they will not be able to come along in the growth with you, because if you are the faster one learning the fastest. So thank you. Yes.
Thanks very much for highlighting some of the real issues that the growing industry faces at the moment. One of those is that the massive research isn't the answer. It's how rapidly new research develops and the research is applied in the field. The other is that such a lot of what people are doing is not patents and intellectual property like that. It's kind of like black box. It's commercial know-how, how to make it. And the other is this question of approaching the process of farming insects almost like the HACCP, the hazard analysis critical control pathway approach to food processing. So in a way, it's almost one stage on from the ordinary farming that people are doing, where they're putting some sheep in a field and then taking them out to harvest them. There's obviously on the ground hazard analysis from the foxes getting, etc., but there's no real approach to this systematic hazard analysis and control in traditional farming. It has to be applied in insect farming because of the sensitivity of the farmed insects to the pathogens. We do have the luxury of several minutes for questions. I'd also like to say that Ilkka asked whether there were any other people from outside the UK in the audience. I know one of them already from Brazil. If you're interested in what's happening in Brazil, then ask transfer over here. But there are several people I can see who would have the potential probably for talking about what's happening outside the UK and indeed outside Finland or outside France. Over to you now. Thank you very much, and please bring your questions forward.
Brilliant summary, brilliant presentation. The work that you put into this to kind of be that leading voice at this present moment about how the industry is developing. Where, in terms of European countries, which ones do you think are approaching this the right way, and should be the ones that we should be taking most thought leadership from, or continual conversations to go about the community network?
Yeah, this is a very difficult question. Yeah, it's, I know back in Finland we are very strict, and you are not allowed to sell any products. But I think you can import some. But then I think the other extreme end is the Belgium with more freedom. Yeah, I think I would just wish that we could cooperate in the EU level. I also hope you will stay in the EU. Just for your own sake, but that's enough of the politics. Yeah, but I think it would be beneficial to we would cooperate. I think maybe we are a bit too cautious in a way, as we can see that there is. If the reason is that in EU we don't have long history of consumption, but then we can see that in the neighboring areas there is very long tradition. So why would it be different in Europe?
So I'm understanding that right, really with such a new environment that it's not how each country specifically and businesses or the frameworks inside Egypt, we need to look at this as a whole of Europe and be able to
and I hope we can open the markets very fast as the North American companies are moving ahead all the time.
There is an interesting point here in the difference between eating insects as solid objects that have been treated in some way and eating insect elements and components that have been processed and separated out and then included in other feeds. And it's where the clash between traditional foods and novel foods comes into play in Europe. And the difficulties then of doing things according to whatever EFSA decides or the European Commission decides is going to be the right approach. There probably won't be one right approach. People will have to accommodate to something or other here. But it's an interesting quandary, and I think different people are tackling it in different ways. We have some other questions, please. If not, we'll. And there's one over here and one coming up over here as well. Please, could you give your name and where you come from when you are?
Hi, my name is Tom, and we are trying to start a company and launch a cricket-based product. So it's really interesting to be here. And what I was wondering was, maybe 15, 20 years ago, just on the theme of being a novel product, like sushi, there are some foods which were thought novel, especially in the European countries, whereas in other parts like Asia, it was quite accepted. So, is there anything we can learn? How did that happen? Where the Western countries begin to accept those and what can we learn?
Oh, okay. I think this may be more of the marketing question. Yeah, but I think it's a great example comparing to sushi, and sushi has not disappeared since it came. So I think that's something we hope to happen in this industry as well. Or maybe there's someone talking more about the end products today. We can answer better to this question.
Tony Askins from Yumper. It might be more of a comment rather than a question, but I feel that you could easily replace your use of the words farms with, in my experience as a manufacturer of energy bars, with contract manufacturers. So it used to be maybe 6 months ago, even before the European legislation changed, that the industry was blissfully ignorant, and especially about the allergen aspect. And now they're very, very, I see it's a major challenge for all entrepreneurs and startups is getting a contract manufacturer to take on new products without having a huge amount of capital investment available for themselves to spend. And at the moment, I don't know if everybody's aware, there's a national shortage of ginger nut biscuits, and that's because they're all made in one factory.
Okay.
And that got flooded, which is the volcano.
Yeah.
So if we just have one manufacturer of snack bars, for example, pasta, then that only needs to be hit by a fire or a flood.
Yeah.
And that could, I see, maybe even more of a knock-on effect than the farmers, which may be more numerous.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thanks, Jay. I think you have.
Yeah. When one comes to a meeting that isn't really one's main sphere, you get a chance to ask some rather naive questions and not feel too guilty. But you mentioned possible problems with pathogens, and I'm sure you're quite right to highlight that. And a friend of mine used to run a salmon farm, and he got completely wiped out by a pathogen. So my question, just about the industry as a whole, are there any thoughts towards the equivalent of going out with a trawler and catching the wild stuff, as opposed to everything being done on farms, or is the whole industry likely to be centered on farming?
Yeah. Okay. So in the Western world, the demand is very high. So like for fish feed, I think the consumption annually is like millions of tons. So if you want to get a cut there, you have to rear so much that it is not possible taking from the wild. So yes, this is it's gonna be based on farms for sure. But then about the pathogens, you are right. I think in United States last year there were a lot of problems with egg farming and with poultry farming, just with their some avian flu was rampant there. And this is very interesting when you compare to the traditional farming. Even though they have a lot of antibiotics in use and they have a lot of R&D resources, and even they are not able to control the pathogens. So how could we assume that things would go so very nicely here? But there's also a positive side that as the industry is now developing, we have we don't carry the burden of the past. We can set the infrastructure in modern standards and then control the pathogens better. But I think it's just prevention is the key, not the treatment. And now maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but so the insects they have inner immune system, not acquired one, so you cannot vaccinate insects just because of this reason. So that's another thing that is technology that is cut out from this industry.
Question over here. Yes.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ilkka, for sharing your experience. My name is François. I am the CEO and founder of Entomophagy.
Okay.
We are operating in Brazil since 2013. Anyway, we had a lot of adventures since. I've interacted with insects, Antoine and Jean-Gabriel, and we also participated in the creation of IPIF in Brussels. And
by the way, in 2 weeks from now, there will be active meeting in Brussels for those who are interested in Finland. If you want to attend, you can contact them and see if there's still some spots. All right, so my question, actually, it's 2 questions. I think you're absolutely right to say that the major risk for insect rearing at a large scale is pathogens, and because of this question mark of, we do not know as of today what are those pathogens yet in those scales. I think you're absolutely right. Now, in terms of the strategy, what do you think about genetical improvement of the insects as a possible strategy of, mitigating that risk? And if that is a possible strategy to add to the others, how would you suggest that you implement it? I mean, without going too many details. And would that strategy change from macro category of insects? We're talking about the Polyptera on one side, the Diptera on the other, the Lepidoptera on the other. Would they be, in your point of view, from your experience, would there be significant difference in those strategies of genetical improvement?
Okay, yeah. So I discussed this question as well with Jürgen Ehlenberg, and he said that companies should not consider like genetic improvements right as of now, as there is there's the risk of inbreeding. So this is more like an issue than he was concerned that there are so many open questions that if you try to improve some characteristics of an insect species, you might end up having you get one pro but then 10 cons. So yeah, he was very concerned about this question, being like the answer.
Mind if I interrupt you? What kind of methodology? Because I'm not talking about genetically modified insects. I'm talking about more about finding native.
Okay.
In nature. And bringing them in.
Yeah. Okay. This is okay. I got it. Okay. Good. Yeah. So we have like about 2,000 species, right, that are edible. So there's a big variety, but there are some characteristics that limit which ones you can rear in high scale. So you have to have relatively large size, you can control them. You have to have a lot, of course they can survive in big colonies. But then there's also questions, for example, like simultaneous development of one generation. So this is a thing that you might not consider first, but then if you have a species that would be otherwise very good for rearing, but then if those insects turn into pupa and then imago in very different stages, it's very difficult to control the production. So yeah, and also you have to cut off almost all the insects that are eating other insects, so you have to only have insects feeding on plant-based product. Because if you are rearing something, insects that are eating other insects, it is not there is not knowledge enough how to make facetious, is that the right word, like artificial prey. So you have to rear 2 species and you can only sell 1. So that's makes it too complicated. So all these questions narrow down your choice from the 2,000. I don't know how much, maybe 100. That's a lot compared to what we see now, what are being reared. But then also that if you take some obscure species, you have also again the question of horizontal integration. If you are the only one with this special species, but because now we have the black soldier fly for feed, and then we have house cricket and mealworm. So when you share the market with other companies, then you have you benefit from the other companies. There was a seminar last year in Finland, and there was a speaker from Protifarm. It's one of the big operators from the Netherlands, and they say that they are now focusing on the lesser mealworm. And to my knowledge, they're like the only one or one of the few doing that. So then, if you are doing a bar of or end product, you only want the mealworm, not the lesser mealworm. So then I think it might be an issue. But if there's a lot of benefit from using the lesser mealworm over the traditional one, then I guess other companies should follow there. But yeah, many questions.
Ilkka, thank you very much.
Okay, we have time.
So
Yeah.
thanks.